And then for the new folks, just if you're not familiar with the new microphone system, I think is it the same rule as the other one, right? That if you have two or more people speaking, it just washes out.
They're out.
So, yeah, we have to kind of observe decorum when we speak here, because you won't be live.
Yep. I get to start both of them and turn over the gavel to someone else.
World.
Both last year.
Interesting piece of paper.
Is it just me or am I lower?
You're lower.
You got the jumpy one. Yeah. There's a couple real stinkers here. Oh, you've got the ones from out there.
Yeah. Since I'm shorter than most of you, I was glad I got a tall chair.
Feel more comfortable swapping out on you guys. Or what do we have in the other room? Are they those kinds of chairs?
Here's Doug.
Evening, how you doing? Oh, wow.
Good.
I hadn't had a break all day.
Is that really hot?
In my face.
Is that a bucking chair?
Yeah.
Yeah. For the old folks.
Like what I have at work.
All I can offer is this one, though. What is the temperature?
Yeah, you haven't acclimated yet. Just wait, in another couple of years, this will like kill you.
Have rules.
Yeah, it's something that's usually read, and it was never included in the packet before Kathy found it and printed it out. It's from the 2000 City of Lincoln City Budget Committee Handbook. Well,
Like a reading cabinet.
but we still use that part.
Well, I guess you know, one of the things that we got on the block, I went to the website looking for something.
Okay, Ron. On this swimming lesson thing.
The budget's there, but budget handbook,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
And
And there's nothing in there. You'll see ordinances kind of like.
yeah, it's all.
But you could have more than one.
And I got a copy. Everybody got a copy.
No, no.
Dinner.
Yeah, this is the legal.
What are you doing?
ordinance.
No, there was Barbara out there. They've got to get a budget on it.
You got this. Right?
Well, we're very high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
Saturday.
But it's.
Who's in charge of the shindig?
Legislation.
All right.
The level, no.
Just going to do it.
Well, it's 5:02, and I think everybody's here. Oh, yeah. Is Kathy going to be here?
She is.
Yeah, okay. I'll wait for her.
That's the person who can't start.
All right. I think the last meeting I started, I did start with her. Had to wait.
I think you did.
And ended late.
Yeah.
Need to be better this time. We're thinking all about 6:30.
Did Randy do do something wrong?
He's still eating sandwiches.
He gets his own private monitor over
I
there.
want you to know, I had nothing to do with the way the chairs are set up. I simply turned that over to somebody else.
I just hope you'll apologize and, okay.
Who do we have to thank for the sandwiches?
Kathy and
Yeah.
Stacy.
Thank you.
They were okay.
It must have come from
Oh, they
Subway.
didn't come from, they came from Safeway, not from
Safeway,
Subway.
that's right.
I almost just stopped at Subway and got something. On her way.
Should be a short one.
Yeah. That's my take.
What's that? Take the box if you need it. No problem. You want to do that right now?
Why?
Kathy will do it. Yeah.
I got it. Thank you. That's yours too? No, I think this one's fine. If I run short, I'll know where it is.
Right, I call to order this Lincoln City Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting of April 18th, 2016. For those who wish to speak before the Lincoln City Urban Renewal Budget Committee, please use the sign-up sheet near the entrance door to the council chambers. You will be called to speak during agenda item number H, comments from citizens present. Roll call, please, Kathy Steer.
Dick Anderson.
Here.
Jim Davis.
Here.
Doug Holbrook.
Here.
Chester Norikis.
Here.
Dee Ritchie.
Here.
Wes Ryan.
Here.
James Scrutton.
Here.
John Skipper.
Here.
Roger Sprague.
Here.
Susan Walke.
Here.
Kip Ward.
Here.
Jerry Warner.
Here.
Randy Weldon.
Here.
Don Williams.
Here.
Roll call, Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda tonight is election of chair and vice chair. I now open from the floor the nominations for chair.
Madam Chair,
That's Mr. Davis.
I'd like to nominate you, Susan Waukee, again.
Thank you.
Second.
Any further nominations?
Seconded by who?
Mr. Ritchie.
Move to close the nominations.
Oh, wait a minute, Kip was trying to say
I
something.
had an alternative selection.
Okay.
It would be Dick Anderson.
I second that.
I have a question, if I might, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Is this just for the urban renewal or for the
Yes.
whole?
This is just for urban renewal.
Okay, thank you.
Any further nominations? May I entertain a motion to close the nominations?
moved.
Second.
Ms.
I may have to have each person say their name that's doing a motion because I'm having a difficult time trying to keep
I was
track
going
of
to say,
who's making
Mr.
the
Ryan
motions.
moved and Mr. Williams
Seconded to closing.
to close. Did you get the nomination and the second on the two nominations, Kathy?
I had
Mr. Davis, seconded by Mr. Ritchie. Mr. Anderson was nominated by Mr. Ward, seconded by myself.
Okay. We will do it by ballot. I'll pass around the ballots.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we didn't vote to close the nominations. All those in favor of closing the nominations, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay. Nominations are closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
There's an extra one there.
One vote, Susan Walke. One vote, Susan Walke. One vote, Dick Anderson. One vote, Dick Anderson. One vote, Susan Walke. One vote, Susan Walke. One vote, Dick Anderson. One vote, Dick Anderson. One vote, Susan Walke. One vote, Susan Walke. One vote, Susan Walke. One vote, Dick Anderson. One vote, Susan Walke. And then I have one that's not valid.
Okay. I have 5 for Anderson and 8 for Waukee. So one,
Okay. So now we need a motion
so I
to,
will entertain a motion to appoint Susan Waukee as chair.
So moved. Second. West. Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Norikis and seconded by Mr. Ryan to appoint Susan Waukee as Chair of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you for your vote of confidence. And now open from the floor nominations for Vice Chair.
Madam Chair, I nominate Dick Anderson.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Norikis and seconded by Mr. Sprague to nominate Dick Anderson as Vice Chair.
Madam Chair, I move that we close nominations.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Sprague and seconded by Mr. Ryan to close the nominations. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The motion passed. I'd entertain a motion to appoint Dick Anderson as Vice Chair.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Ryan, seconded by Mr. Norikis to appoint Dick Anderson as Vice Chair of the Urban Renewal Budget Committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. Motion passes. Okay. Next on the item is the reading of the rules of procedure. The Budget Committee must receive the budget message from the budget officer, the city manager, review the proposed budget, hear public questions and comments, approve the budget for council adoption, and approve the property tax amount or rate of property taxation. As provided in state law, the Budget Committee must receive the budget document before the first meeting reviewing the proposed budget. The document must also be available to the public at the same time. Once the budget document has been made public, only the Budget Committee and/or the governing body can make changes. The Budget Committee may request any information it requires for review of the budget document from the staff. Generally, these requests are directed to the city manager or department head. The Budget Committee does not approve new personnel, employment contracts, or salary schedules. However, these items are part of the proposed budget and have a fiscal impact. While the Budget Committee cannot negotiate contracts, it can adjust the dollar amount in the proposed budget that is available for these expenses. These adjustments would affect staffing or service levels. The Budget Committee can also review capital expenditures and make adjustments to them. Mr. Chandler, I believe you're next for the budget message. Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. It's a pleasure to be with you again and to discuss the budget for the Urban Renewal Agency. Just a couple of things that just a couple reminders from our training session. The first is that we will be going through each of these funds. In this case, there are 4 funds that make up the Urban Renewal Agency budget. Each fund is meant to be a self-balancing set of accounts. So in many of the funds, as we go through these, you will see transfers back and forth where the expense of one fund becomes the revenue of another fund. We will keep track as a staff of the discussions, and so that if there's any changes that are being discussed to the budget, we will keep track of those. We will bring them back forward to you at your next meeting and show the effects of those changes, and then have the committee vote individually on each proposed change, and then vote to adopt the budget as a whole with the changes that have been discussed and approved. So what that essentially means is that during this meeting, as we go through it, we won't be making motions to adjust that. We will keep track of the discussions and then bring them back. The reason for that is that I have found it effective in my career to look at the changes collectively as a whole on how they affect the budget. Often one change will affect the budget in another way and so forth. And so it gives you an opportunity at the next meeting to see the entire changes to the budget that your discussions bring out. Last year, one of the comments that I had received from a member of the public was that we kept referring to pages within the budget, but of course, the public did not have something to see, so we have, for this budget meeting, we've taken all of the pages, we've put them onto the screen, Excel spreadsheet, so that as we go through those, not only do you have it in paper form in front of you, but it's also on the screen so that those who are watching at home or may watch it at a later time can see what we're discussing. Part of it is that most budgets do not change drastically, the line items from year to year, so I've highlighted in pink some of the major things that we'll discuss and explain what those changes are about. The other line items, even though we may not hit on them, feel free to ask questions about them, and we'll answer those as best as we can. And then finally, as we did last year, I really enjoyed the tag team approach. So as we go through this, so I have our finance director, Debbie Mamoni, our urban renewal director, Kurt Olson, and our assistant director, Allison Robertson, who are up here with me. And they get to answer the hard questions. So whenever I feel stumped, I'll turn to them and say, okay, your answer. And actually, it works better that way because they are much more involved in the day-to-day details, where I have the privilege of supervising a very fine staff. One final thing, I used to work with...
Say one more. I just want to make a point. Again, I've heard from people before that we're not always getting people hearing what we're saying, so if we could stay close to the mic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, I used to work with a city councilor named Del Brinkerhoff, who would always say to me as I came into the meeting, the longer you talk, the less money you get. And so we will try to be thorough but also concise, recognizing that people have other things to do. And I also know there's a point where people just start glazing over in their eyes when they're dealing with numbers. So our goal for this meeting is to go through all 4 funds of the Urban Renewal Agency so that at your next meeting you'll be able to move forward if you so desire. The first fund is found on page 27. I'm sorry, it's found on page 5 of the of section 3, or the Urban Renewal budget. It follows the message. The first set of numbers following the message.
Mr. Chandler, on that lease income, which building is that off of?
That is for I'm going to turn to, pardon me, D Lake School. You need to speak into the mic.
So they are beginning to pay for it?
The agreement to, not waive, but the agreement for them not to pay runs out on July 1st. So so we put it in there as coming back.
Last year I asked a question about the Ballard building down with the glass blowing, which Urban Renewal paid for. And I see doesn't show any income off of that building for Urban Renewal.
You're talking about the Jennifer Sears Studio?
Yes.
That is not a part of the Urban Renewal Fund. That's part of the VCB fund.
Well, it was paid for by Urban Renewal.
Okay, but the revenues are accounted for in the VCB funds.
Are there any other questions about the lease income?
Well, I guess I'd have a question, Madam Chair, is piggybacking on Mr. Warner asked, and for clarification's sake, is that a normal procedure, that it would start in one and then shift to another, and how do we keep track of that?
Well,
who do they go through to get that okay?
As with all of our funds, they are set up either by statutory purposes, or they're set up by for the purpose of tracking where those monies are coming from and where they're being expended. I don't think I can tell you at this point why the Jennifer Sears Studio is under the VCB, although the VCB is in charge of any maintenance that's associated with that building. There are funds that are expended for that are coming out of the VCB funds and not coming out of the Urban Renewal. But I could not tell you, looking back 10 years, as to why that was set up that way. I'd have to look that up.
with Mr. Olson?
No, I can't tell you how it was set up that way, but I can tell you that it was a partnership between the Urban Renewal Agency and the VCB. The Urban Renewal Agency did indeed buy the building and did a remodel to the building, and then the VCB bought all of the equipment that's in the building.
And they've always received the income from it then?
As far as I know, they've always received the income and taken care of the maintenance and the agreement and the contract.
Okay.
And those issues.
All right, so it's never shown up under urban renewal as an
As
income?
far as I know, it never has.
All right, thank you.
Just clarification, are they going to make a presentation on their budget request, or are we just going to dive in on each line item?
That's up to the chair.
Mr. Chandler, I'd like you to go forward with your presentation.
Okay. Well, we touched base on the first part, and that is the lease income that's associated with this fund. Most of the revenue comes from the fund balance. This was a debt that was taken out several years ago, and currently the estimated beginning fund balance is $1,013,459. Under the personal services, the expenditures for salaries that you're seeing there are reflecting some changes we're having in our personnel. Mr. Olson is retiring at the end of June, and as we look to that, we are making some changes whereby his replacement will become a full-time employee, and the part-time employee will be an assistant to the director.
Madam Chair, if I might, I'm sorry. Did you want us to hold questions until he's done, and then, I don't want to interrupt, but if you're more comfortable with that, Mr. Chandler, I just want to know when I get to ask a question.
Again, that's up to you guys.
Waiting.
That's up to the chair.
I think if we can let Mr. Chandler explain one section, then we can have questions.
Sections, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, can I revisit the first section on resources?
Could I add, one of the functions of the committee is to receive the budget message from the budget officer. It might be hard to define what that message actually is if it's spread out throughout the meetings in little
Okay.
pieces. Just
No.
a thought.
In the past, we've kind of gone over the message and then attacked line by line. So let's let Mr. Chandler present the message, and then we will go through it line by line.
Under the contracted services, that includes $12,000 for the urban renewal's contribution to the comprehensive plan. It's based upon the percentage of the city land that is a part of the urban renewal as compared to the entire amount. It also includes $10,000 for realtor services. If you look back up on the revenues, you'll see that it includes $50,000 for sale of land. The Urban Renewal Agency has recently discussed selling some of the property that the agency owns, and in part of that, we are looking at the hiring a realtor to help us with that process. Under capital outlay, we have $12,000 for some glass foundry siding, some improvements, $180,000 for the Bay Park, Bay Area sidewalk, $20,000 for the Eagles parking lot, and $3,000 for the Nelscott sign. And I'm going to ask Kurt to talk about each of those four just briefly.
I'm sorry.
Madam Chair,
Please go ahead.
that's the Cultural Center parking lot, isn't it, Mr. Chandler? Not the Eagles?
I believe it's the Eagles.
Just the Eagles.
Kurt, will you talk about each of these?
Certainly. So, building improvements, at the top of the page, the $12,000 we allocated. If you've been behind the glass foundry lately, you see that the siding is in really bad shape. Weather's really starting to get to it. And so there's been discussion in the last couple of years about the possibility of opening up one of the walls and putting in a garage door and providing some space for another type of similar business in that building that could occupy that space. So that's some funding to do that. The next one down, the $180,000, is for the improvement project that you've heard about before. Just to the north of the Bay House Restaurant, there's that gravel turnout parking area there and a little walking access to the beach. We've got a project designed there for about 150 feet of sidewalk and to pave that parking lot, put an island in close to the road. It won't be in the road, but it's to designate the parking from the highway, and some signage there as well. The next cultural center, that is funding that we have included in our budget to work to provide for maintenance and or capital improvement grants to the cultural center. And the last one then is the Nelscott renovation projects. There's two projects in that one. One that we've discussed for a few years about the possibility of needing more parking in Nelscott, and one of the options that we've talked about and presented to the Eagles was that we might be in a position to improve their parking lot, signed it as a public parking lot, in order to provide some more parking. And they feel like there's a possibility that that could work. They're kind of talking that over as a possibility. One of the ways that that would work probably is that if just all of the businesses, if all of their employees parked in the Eagles parking lot during the day, it wouldn't affect the Eagles at all, yet it would free up an awful lot of parking for visitors. The other thing in there is one of our neighborhood signs, and you've seen these all the way through town. There's actually 11 of them now. They're the ones that say Nelscott, Taft, D-Lake, Ocean Lake, and the district that you're in is highlighted. We have one left to put in. We couldn't put the Nelscott ones in until the Nelscott project was done, because we never did know where the right-of-way was going to be, if it was going to be a 3-lane or a 5-lane or what was going on there. That's all done. So now we have one more to put in. That will be in the Nelscott area. So that's those are the funding for the capital outlay.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, just the signs are included in the Nelscott renovation project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's the last one. It'll be at the the north end of Nelscott as you enter from the north.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Any other questions? We'll entertain questions.
That it?
I've highlighted the things that I wanted to, so
Okay.
if there are other things that you'd like to bring up, please.
Okay.
Please do so.
Thank you. Mr. Ritchie?
Thank you. Mr. Olson, can you give me a little, I'm a new guy on the block here, can you give me a little background on the lease with the cultural center?
There are 4 current lease agreements with the Cultural Center. First one was a 25-year lease that sets out the lease payment over 25 years. And then there was one that allowed for a first right of refusal to purchase the building. We believe that one is currently no longer in effect. They didn't exercise it, so we don't think that one is in effect.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but who is they?
The 4 Cs who run the Cultural
Okay,
Center.
thank you.
There is one, there's been 3, so 2 of them have expired. The current one expires at the end of June, and that was to waive the lease payments for a 3-year period. The ones before that were for a 1-year period, the one before that was for a 2.5-year period. And the last one that expires in August is an agreement for the city to do the landscaping, mow the lawns, and for the Urban Renewal Agency to set up a program to provide grants for them as funding is available for them to do work on the building.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you said that they have not paid rent for 3 years,
That's correct.
and the reason we want to ask for rent now is?
Well, they're agreement expires at the end of June, and so I have not received any request to extend that or to grant an additional time, so I have no other reason to believe that it wouldn't continue.
Mr. Chandler, I have a question. The next city council meeting, is there a cultural center report expected?
I think that was moved to the first meeting in May, but there will be in the next 2 meetings, I believe it is. Is that correct? It was moved to May, but there will be one in May.
Okay. I would really like to hear that report before we finalize the urban renewal budget personally.
Question, please.
Yes, Mr. Richards?
On page 6 at the bottom, the reimbursements to various funds and transfers out of about $100,000. I'm not sure I understand why you're transferring money out if you want to raise the rent on D Lake. Is that a budget? You want to answer that, Debbie?
Sure. So we got two main transfers. The first one listed is reimbursement to the general fund, and that's to reimburse the general fund for services that it provides to urban renewal. For example, payroll services, legal services, city manager services, the running the room meetings here, et cetera. The reimbursement to the Lincoln Square Fund is to reimburse that fund for the maintenance of this building. Urban Renewal occupies some space in this building and consumes resources for the building maintenance.
Okay.
And the percent...
Short answer then being that other funds are paying to support
Yes.
urban renewal, and they are now being reimbursed.
Correct.
Right. And the percent for art is something that the city has. If there's a capital project done by the city, a small percent goes into the percent for art funds, and so urban does that as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Williams?
For the folks who may not know much about urban renewal, could you give us just a brief synopsis of what urban renewal, why it exists, what its mission is, what its constraints are?
Certainly. The urban renewal is a state program allowed by the state of Oregon. There are probably 60 urban renewal districts in the state currently. They get their funding through tax increment financing, which means they get it through property taxes, but it is an additional property taxes. They don't actually get it from property. They don't get it when people pay their property tax. They get it from the taxing districts after they have received that funding. So the it's a locally approved program in that you determine what you want your urban renewal program to be. Many of them around the state are to have an emphasis on industrial land development. Some of them, like ours, is basically a public works infrastructure program, and if it had a minor, its minor would be in visitor services. So we've structured ours in that way. It started out as a 25-year program. It kind of morphed into when you spend as much money as you originally said you were going to spend on projects, that's when you sunset. So we were going to sunset in 2014. We extended it to 2024, and we will be likely will have completed all of our projects before that, and we will. The life of the agency will continue on until 2024, and at that time, it won't collect any more revenue, and it will be just using those funds to pay off the bonds.
All right, and then, just so I'm clear, there's nothing in there about urban blight anymore? We're not here to fix that, to take care of that? I thought that was the main mission, to put properties back on the...
Well, you have to go back to the beginning of the Urban Renewal Agency itself. Urban blight is one of the reasons why you can have an urban renewal agency, and I'm not speaking specifically of this agency. I'm just speaking about agencies in general. And urban blight is one of those reasons. But ultimately, it is the Urban Renewal Agency that determines what it will expend its funds on. When our agency was created, it created a list of the types of projects that would be used, the money would be spent on. The Urban Renewal Agency has never changed that goal, that list. It still exists, and they have been going forward with the performance of the various infrastructure projects or various projects. So the money that is being expended is based upon what the Urban Renewal Agency determined it would be spent upon.
Okay, and then that was voted upon by council at the time?
The Urban Renewal Agency. You
They
create
just
the
created
Urban Renewal.
themselves and
You
determined
create the
themselves?
Urban Renewal Agency, and then that agency then begins the work of putting it all
Okay,
together.
I really just wanted a background, so as I'm looking at this going, okay, is this what it's supposed to be? So that's the only reason I wanted to know.
Well, the answer is yes, this is what it's supposed to be because it is what the Urban Renewal Agency said it would be.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, then a couple of follow-up questions if I can. The Jennifer Sears Gallery, which we've talked about, who owns it?
The Urban Renewal Agency owns the building.
Okay, and then the Urban Renewal is going to be doing repairs on it for the leaseholder or the lessee?
There's the expenditures towards that have been twofold. Anything that has to do with the maintenance of the building has been done through the VCB. That's why it's accounted for this. The project that's a part of this is for some, not only some improvements, but some changes to the building itself. And so Urban Renewal is accounting for those expenditures.
Under what aegis? I don't understand why, if it's, I lease buildings all the time, and I don't get, my landlord doesn't fix them. And I'm just curious why our landlord fixes these buildings.
Kurt, explain.
Who occupies it? Who
First
pays
of all,
for
as
it?
far as the maintenance goes, because it's in the contract.
Okay, so
Okay.
we had a bad contract. I'm just trying to figure out who's
I will
paying
not
for
make
this
that
thing.
judgment call.
You don't
I'll just
have
say
to.
it's in the
I shouldn't have thrown
contract and
those
leave
words
that,
out.
leave that judgment to the Urban Renewal Agency. But
I
as
take
far
it
as
back.
the-
I didn't mean it that way.
As far as the improvements go, that's in this one, specifically the back side of the building, I'll let Kurt address that.
I'm just lost as to who's paying for what and how and why. And it seems pretty tangled.
You certainly have more experience leasing buildings than I do, so I won't try to explain that, all of the options, but it seemed to me like if we have a building and the siding's falling off of it, and we're leasing that building, that we should be leasing a building with siding on it. And so it seems like it would be up to us to maintain the structure of the building.
Not traditionally.
Okay, well, like I said, you have more experience than I.
Okay. All right. So, all right. I'll leave that one lie then. The question about the South Bay Park and the sidewalk, and I'm going to walk carefully because we discussed some of this in executive. Is that part of what we talked about, Ron? Are we free to discuss that whole thing yet? You know what am I being clear enough in my
Free to
reference?
discuss that whole thing yet. I do not know that we are free to discuss that whole thing yet, Mayor.
Okay. Well, I'll leave that one lie then. Okay. I guess, and that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Ward?
Thank you. Regarding the cultural center, I'm passionate about the cultural center, but my knowledge doesn't match my passion. Mr. Chandler, this is to you. If we wanted to give the cultural center more time of non-charging them rent, what is the process that we would have to go through to get that accomplished? Is it something that we can do tonight, or is it something that we can't do in the budget at all?
Well, the Budget Committee would not make that decision. It would be made by the Urban Renewal Agency. So it would not be appropriate for this group to do that. Now, what this group can do is affect the numbers and make recommendations to the Urban Renewal Agency. But ultimately, it would be the decision of the agency in a either an extension or a renegotiation of the contract we have with them.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Narcisse?
are we ready for the budget message yet?
We have highlighted the things that I wanted to. If Mr. Olson would like to go a little bit more into the message that was prepared, that would be fine by me.
I simply have questions. I don't need Mr. Olson to go
Okay,
through the
we're
whole
ready
thing.
for the,
We're ready for
we're ready to
questions.
answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. On page 1, Mr. Olson, Roads End South Sanitary Sewer Lift Station, there's uncertainty with this project. We're going to earmark $1 million plus. What kind of impact is this going to have on sanitary sewer service for that part of town?
I don't believe I'm able to answer that question. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Is Lila available for that?
Good evening.
Evening.
Council and Budget Committee. Sure, all the Budget Committee. So that Roads End South pump station is on Northwest 50th Street, and it's part of the increase in capacity for the north end, and it's also an age station which needs to be upgraded, so it's serving two purposes. And so that would be to finish serving the north end, plus also serving, just upgrading that station as well.
Without upgrading it, what are the consequences? What's the impact of us putting that off?
Not being able to add, it's in conjunction with the West Devils Lake Road pump station, and so it's taking the impact because the sewage is pumped from that pump station, it goes to Wacoma, and so we're upgrading the line at Wacoma, and then the Roads End South also pumps that direction, so they're all tied together, and the north end pump station will allow further growth in that north end area. And then also on the Salasee expansion of the village's property.
But until that growth occurs, we have adequate service?
Yes, yes. I mean, there's a limit to how much more you can add to that station, just like West Devils Lake Road.
On that same page, Lila, that Wacoma major upgrades, that's the Northwest Jetty and 35th Street project that's going on now, is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
I
Williams?
had one last question. I forgot to ask on the sale of land, the $50,000. What was that? Did I miss it?
We have 3 properties that we are in the process of putting on the market, and it's any one of those 3 that we happen to, is ready to go first.
Okay. But each one would be $50,000, or cumulatively, there were $50,000?
We anticipated selling one this year at around $50,000.
Okay. But we could possibly see more?
Absolutely.
You could. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Why were those properties originally purchased?
The 3 we're talking about, the one at the very north end of town is on 15th Street in the Ocean Lake District. If you look in the urban renewal plan, there is a project called the People's Park, and it was identified to assemble a bunch of pieces of property in that area and build a major park. All of the properties in that area are small lots, so it would have taken a lot of accumulation. We had the opportunity to buy several of them at one point in time, but they weren't all contiguous. The Parks Director at the time, once we decided, well, what are we going to do now? Are we going to keep buying up property or what? The Parks Director decided that it wasn't one of his goals, objectives, or the city's objective, because this is the urban renewal plan, not the city's plan. The urban renewal plan didn't match with his goals, and he didn't think that a large park in that area, he wasn't supportive of that. So we used some of that property to run Jetty Avenue between 15th and 16th. We put that street in. We used 2 of the lots to do that. The third lot is the lot that is in the middle of that area next to the small motel there. And since there will be no park there, we've identified it as surplus, and our goal was to put some sort of business there if we could. But otherwise, it doesn't meet any of the goals of what we originally bought the properties for. The second piece is at the D River. That property was purchased with both open space funds and urban renewal funds. There's the section that is really not accessible to people. It's so grown over, it's green space. And that was designated and purchased with open space funds. The rest of it, from the highway to that piece where people park down in there, it was purchased by urban renewal for redevelopment of some sort. That we always felt like the property on the highway could be used for some commercial or retail endeavor, and that we would keep the lower part that was access to the lake for lake access. The final piece is the property in Nelscott. There was about 6 properties that the Urban Renewal Agency assembled in order to be able to move 32nd Street to where it currently is now. And now that that work is done, there are some remnants left over from that. All of it obviously didn't get used for the street. And so now we're in the process of putting together the legal description of what is left and put that on the market and hopefully develop that into some commercial use.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
I believe one of the functions of the urban renewal is to give out low-interest loans to businesses so they can fix up their units, their buildings. Is that right?
That is correct.
I was just curious. Has there been much use, requests for loans?
We have had at least 40 loans over the years that we've had it. We haven't had it the entire length of urban renewal. I think we started it in about 1999. And we started it as a zero-interest facade improvement program for existing commercial buildings. And so there have been about 40 loans, and we've loaned out about we've funded it with $1.2 million, and we get money back as people pay their loans. So we've loaned out about $1.8 million of zero-interest loans.
Are you doing any outreach so that businesses are aware this is available?
Yep, we do every time we think it's prudent, and we've added 2 other loan programs, one for energy efficiency. They want to upgrade their energy efficiency, and then also we started a new one called business expansion program. So if you want to expand your business, add employees or equipment, that sort of thing, we now have a program for that as well. So when we brought those online, we again sent out mailers to everybody in the district, all the businesses in the district. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Narkis?
Excuse me. I have a question, Kurt, on the administration of those loans. Are you using some loan agency to administer that, or are you doing it yourselves?
For the original loan program, we have our money in the Bank of the West. We went out for proposals, and we chose Bank of the West. I think originally it was First Bank of America, but currently it's Bank of the West, Umpqua Bank, but now it's Bank of the West, and so we're using their services. However, they contract out their loan to another company, and so that's the company that manages those loans.
So theoretically, you people don't have any input on the loans then?
We authorize the loans, and once we authorize the loan, then they go through the bank process, so just like anyone else would.
And those are all protected by liens on property?
That's correct. That's correct. The reason I hesitate is because we do have, one of those programs is for business owners. So if you don't own the building, but you own the business, we won't loan you $75,000, but we would loan you $5,000. So if somebody wanted to come in and replace a door or a window or something like that, and they could make an agreement with their landlord, the landlord wouldn't have to encumber their property, and for a $5,000 loan, we felt comfortable with that.
The reason I asked that question is 48% of all the commercial businesses in Lincoln City are owned by absentee ownership. So that's why I was asking how you could have put liens on some of those properties.
Yep. So it's all done by the bank, the same way the bank would do it. It's just zero interest.
Actually, there's one more layer of being able to oversee that process, and that within urban renewal, there is a loan committee that examines all the applications when they come in, and then they go through the rest of the process that Mr. Olson was just talking about.
And who's that committee?
It's 3 of the agency members. It rotates. It changes occasionally, but there's 3 agency members.
Councilmen then, apparently.
Well, they would be counselors too, but they're agency.
It's important to note that the Urban Renewal Agency and the City Council, even though they're the same members, they are not the same entity. They're separate from each other, and quite frankly, the councilors do not have to be, the Urban Renewal Agency do not have, their members can be somebody other than a council. It just so happens that our city and most cities that I am aware of choose their councilors to be the agency, but they are separate entities.
Thank you for that clarification. Mr. Norikis?
Mr. Olson, on page 2 of your message regarding the Nelscott renovation project, which is the second paragraph, you got $20,000 listed for that. And on page 7, I see $23,000 proposed in the budget for the Nelscott renovation project.
Yes. Again, that's the $20,000, just a rough estimate for that parking lot improvements for the Eagles, and the $3,000 that you see later in the budget is for that Nelscott sign. So they're just
Thank
lumped
you.
together in the same.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair,
Mr. Williams?
back to the Sears Gallery and the improvement, you've contracted to make those improvements, right? So it's not something we can even negotiate anymore.
We haven't contracted for it, we haven't designed it.
No, it's in your contract with them to repair things like this? I just need to know how I'm going to vote on this. If we don't have to do it, I'm going to say no. But if we're already contractually obligated to make these kind of repairs, or if you or the Urban Renewal Agency is, then it's a moot point to discuss it.
Well, I'll bring back the language of the contract so that you know exactly what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have other questions? We're getting close to 6 o'clock, and I would like to entertain a motion to continue this meeting till May 2nd. Is that the next scheduled meeting?
It is.
Correct?
So moved?
Mr. Ryan has moved.
Second.
Mr. Norikis has seconded to reconvene on May 2nd at 5 o'clock. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Well, just a quick question, Madam Chair, and it may be a moot point again. Do we have to have a discussion period before our vote, though, between the
Oh, yeah.
second? And I just wanted to make sure everyone had a say.
Oh, excuse me, yes. Anybody want to talk about reconvening? All right.
Then I'm an aye.
All right. Thank you.
Just want to ask.
Great. So we are adjourned until May 2nd.
Susan, we aren't adjourned, though. We're actually just continued till, are we not?
Yes, excuse me, yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Until. Thank you. I knew what I meant, but that's not always what comes out. I got more questions myself here. Okay, thanks. I was hoping to hand it over.
Well, anyway, I'll drop you off a copy. John, how the hell are you? Yeah.
Okay, considering my 3 hours today.
Are you going to come to that meeting tomorrow night?
Yes, you read your packet.